How did he do, Damien? How did he do? What did he do that was great?
He described everything I said. He listened.
Are there different levels of listening?
Yes.
Yes. Book. So these are on page 3.3 at the bottom.
3.3.
How many of us felt like our partner was just pretending to listen? That's like a flames go up. Sorry, that's kind of a mean question, but don't raise your hand if you felt like your partner was just pretending to listen, but you know, don't you? You know if they're pretending to listen. How many of us felt like our partner was just being selective in their listening? Well, now here's something. If your partner didn't talk for at least, if you talked for 90 seconds and they only talked for 60 seconds, they were being selective, weren't they? Are their memories not very good? Or both? Right? How many of our felt like our partners were being attentive? A lot of us probably felt that way, right? Why did you feel that way, Alex?
Because the eye contact, nodding, saying back things, clarifying to make sure that they understood what I was saying.
This is the definition of being present, right? At least at that level of kind of close to attentive listening. Is there a time when we should ignore people?
Yes.
Definitely, right? When?
Oh, you should have. I was thinking we know what's going to change.
Like when should we ignore somebody?
Rambling.
So, sometimes they're rambling, we may tune them out. We have to be careful, right? We have to be listening carefully. And naturally, as human beings, we kind of go up and down. That dial turns up to proactive listening and it turns down to ignoring listening. Sometimes with our kids, sometimes you have to ignore them. Right? I would say if they're in the back seat of your car and you're on a road trip, if you don't ignore them, you're literally going to drive into a pole. So there's times when you have to do that, right? Likewise with our customers. How many of us felt like our partners were doing proactive listening? Okay, what's proactive listening?
He was asking more about what I was telling him.
Okay. So proactive listening is listening to understand, asking questions to clarify, reciting back to the person what we've heard, right? And being in the moment, right? Maybe even taking notes, all that stuff, right? Offering solutions or suggestions, that's proactive listening. What listening mode do we need to be in to advance a sale?
Proactive.
Oftentimes a proactive, right? So not an easy thing to do, right? We have to be in the moment. We have to know when to kind of switch it on. Maybe the customer's rambling for a little bit. Time to let's try to refocus or ask a question to kind of dive in deeper.
Oh,
Good?
yeah, they get off focus all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is more of the power of these questions, right? They definitely will get off focus and off track. So we've got to ask those good questions to kind of keep it moving forward. So there's 4 types, and those types are on page 3.4. Could we have one person who wouldn't mind reading it, just read that first paragraph for us? We'll go to one voice for a second. Go for it, Alex.
An effective model for asking questions allows us to discover the buyer's interest areas. The process of gathering information should be conversational and capture the information we need in order to present compelling solutions. The research we do and the questions we ask will help us identify a buyer's interest areas. This will help us make our solution unique for each buyer. A good questioning process points us to the interest areas. Implication questions create a sense of urgency by establishing a gap in the mind of the buyer.
So using your selective listening skills, underline the words that were most important in what he just said. Teresa, what'd you underline?
Gathering information, capturing information, compelling solutions, interest areas, help to identify the buyer's interest area,
Which one's most important to you? Which of those phrases are those underlined areas?
Gathering information.
Okay. What about Rodrigo? What did you underline?
Urgency and the mind of the buyer.
Hey, why did you underline those? Why are they so important to you?
The buyer being the leader, right?
Yep.
That's how we make our money.
Okay.
It's urgent to, what's on their mind.
Here's a beautiful thing, right? I mean, how many of us have ever been in a situation where we feel like a deal should have closed, we should have received the application weeks ago and we still haven't received it? Right? Happens all the time, right? So if we set a deadline for that dealer, if we say to him, hey, I really need that by Tuesday, how well does that go? Doesn't do very well, does it? But what if we said, so you said that you were trying to meet your goal for the end of the month. In order for us to help you get that car sold by the end of the month, I'm going to need the application on Wednesday. What would be the impact of that?
Much better.
Right? So Rodrigo's point here is really good, right? I mean, it's an excellent point. We can sell urgency to the customer on the basis of what they've told us, but we have to listen for their deadlines. And then we have to remind them of their deadlines. Right? Now, we've had this little game that we've been playing for the last 3 days, right? It was a rule that we came up with where if you came in late to the class, you had to
Tell us.
So I could have done that a different way, right? I could have said, if you're late, you're a bad person. Or if you're late, we're all going to yell at you.
That's what you said yesterday morning.
I didn't say that. It happened, but I didn't say it. So the point is this, right? We can let the customer set the ground rules for us and help them stick to their own ground rules. And it makes life so much easier than trying to push them. Make sense? And we listen, we find that out by being attentive. We find that out by asking these questions. So now hopefully you've got all sorts of good reasons to ask questions. It helps us set the urgency. It helps us understand these interest areas. It helps us close the deal. So what we need probably is a system for asking these questions. As you see there on page 3.4, there's 4 types. There's as is, should be, barrier, and payout. Now, how many of us have ever taken a sales course or read a sales book before? Okay, a few of us have. So do you remember what you read or what you took before, Alex?
A lot, but I would say Secrets Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar.
Okay, cool. And so, did he talk at all about questions in that process?
A little bit.
Do you remember any lesson from that? Like, what, in your own words, what's a lesson?
Questions specifically?
Yeah, about questions.
For some reason, all I'm coming up with from Zig is buy your own product so you can sell it better. That's the only thing I'm
That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
So understand what it's like to buy your own product. That's a big one, right? So who else raised their hand when I said other sales courses? Go for it.
Open-ended questions that's a big thing. You have to let them tell you what they want.
What's an open-ended question?
Where they can respond back.
Did I just ask an open-ended question? Was that a closed-ended
So
question?
yes or no, they have to.
All right. So closed-ended questions are yes or no questions. They're used to confirm, used to move the sale forward, right? Once we've heard the customer's ideas. Open-ended questions are used to get their ideas out on the table. Does that make sense? We ready to go on? That's a trial close. That's a whole other type of question, right? So that's what we're going to be practicing over this next section is we're going to get good at asking really interesting questions, and we're going to advance the sale through the use of those questions. Make sense? Okay. So there's 4 types. They're on page 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, and 3.8. In a moment, we're going to be filling them out. But just so you understand the basics here, the 4 types are as is, should be, barrier, and payout. As is questions are questions about the customer's current situation. Right? What's the situation they're faced with now? Right? Should be questions are questions about what they want. What's the ideal situation? Hey, if you could wave a magic wand and create a perfect loan for this person, what would it look like? What would be the features of it? That's a should be question. Barrier questions are what's standing in the way? Why haven't they moved forward yet? Right? And payout questions are what's in it for them? Hey, if we're able to get this thing done for you in 2 days, how's that going to help you? If they say, I don't need it in 2 days, I need it in 5, no problem. We'll get it done for you in 5 days, right? That's a payout question. How is it going to help you? So there's the 4 types of questions. Let's please think about our customer that we wrote down on the note card, who we also just fill out the interest areas for, and let's fill out example questions on those pages. So those pages, again, just so everybody's clear on them, are pages 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, and 3.8. In order to help you, there's example questions on each of those pages. So feel free to kind of use those example questions or change those example questions. But be sure to write at least 2 questions, as is, should be, barrier, and payout, for the customer you're going to be practicing with. 2 questions in each category, or 8 total. Good? Clear on the instructions? Okay, let's go ahead and do that now. In a couple moments, we're going to hear some of these, then we're going to go to our second break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to practice asking the questions. So take your time.